These unconventional times require unconventional conversations. Listen in as your host, Richard Gordon, engages in one-on-one conversations with numerous leaders, elected officials, politicians, and others to learn what's happening in your state, on the Hill, and across America. Now, here's the host of Unconventional Times, Richard Gordon.
Hello, and thank you for joining us at Unconventional Times. This is Richard Gordon. Let's continue with our conversation with Dennis Burke. The last time we talked to Dennis, we talked about the potential for a governmental shutdown because of a lack of funding and the role of the Attorney General and the Department of Justice and where the whole criminal justice system is moving. So let's continue with that. I wanted to talk to Dennis a little bit more. Well, first of all, Dennis, welcome back. I should have said that. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard.
There's just too much Dennis Burke. We needed more time. So thank you. I want to talk to you about crime, which is a subject I know you know a lot about as a former United States attorney who, was literally on the front lines fighting crime. I've spent a good amount of time looking at statistics over the last year or so about crime in the United States. And in virtually every major American city, the crime has gone down. But as we all know, the President of the United States has sent the National Guard into American cities like DC and Memphis, LA, and just recently Portland. And he's threatened them to send them into New York and Chicago. I looked into the numbers a little bit, Dennis, and clearly Memphis has the worst crime rate in the country based on, per 1,000 people. But you look at cities like DC, which is 36, LA is 71, New York City is 86, Chicago is 120, which surprised me. Portland is 71. So I have a couple questions for you. One is if you know, what is going on with crime? It looks like it's going down, but why these cities? What's your feeling as a former United States attorney, the guy who is the lead law enforcement guy in your state? Why these cities? Why is the president sending the National Guard in?
Because he thinks it's a good political issue for him. I mean, the
Not
functionality.
a criminal justice issue.
No, I think it's a political issue. I mean, there's some belief, I think, even from the president's own words, that he's sending him to Portland because he saw a video from 5 years ago of Portland and he thought it was today. So these aren't. I mean.
Was that following the riots in Minnesota and other places after?
Yeah, it was 2020. He was reported that you can look. I mean, I think he even made a remark that he saw a film of 2020. That was 5 years ago, in response to an incident that led to kind of a national wave. But I mean, here's the issue that doesn't make any sense about what he's doing. The National Guard are not sworn police officers who can figure out how to bring peace and order to a city or reduce crime, because they're not involved in investigations or taking leads or making arrests. That's not what they do. I mean, so if you really wanted to do something, if this was legit, you figure out how to detail police officers from somewhere else to a particular city, because that's a skill set, right? That's what they do. That's what a police officer does. He looks at it monolithically. He thinks they're all, well, I've got the Army, I've got the National Guard, I got police, and bad people are doing bad things, and we just send in troops. It makes no sense.
But we have done that before. We have done that, during the race riots, for example, in the 1960s. We just talked about George Floyd a little bit. In Minnesota, they sent the National Guard in. During the situation in Los Angeles a number of years, they sent the National Guard in. More as a peacekeeping force, I think.
As a peacekeeping force, and there were actual street disturbances, riots going on. That makes a sense. We're going to clear the streets, and we're going to prevent looting. That's not going on in Chicago. That's not going on in Memphis. That's not going on in Portland. Memphis, well, they have a high crime rate. We'll figure out how to bring more police officers in. There's not rioting going on in the streets, and he's not making this decision based on advice he's getting from someone at the Justice Department who oversees state and local law enforcement, who says, look, we could have an impact on this by being a force multiplier in Memphis for a period of time. They're not doing that. They're literally just, it's coming from the top. He's watching TV. He hears about something going on, and all of a sudden he's sending the National Guard and troops in there. I mean, the Los Angeles situation makes absolutely no sense. And you can't have a long-term impact for 30 to 60 days, we're going to send National Guard to drive up and down streets in a major city. It will have no permanent impact.
So it's not there to do crime per se. It's there to send what? Send a message?
Right. It's there just to be able to, it's theater. It's pure theater. It's look at I've got these troops here and we're going to stop crime. But how? What are these National Guard members doing? I mean, we saw it in D.C. They ended up picking up litter.
Yeah, I heard that most of them were in parts of DC where tourists were and around the monuments and that type of stuff, but not in the areas of DC that have a crime situation or drugs or whatever. So,
Yeah, I
so
mean, if you wanted to have an impact on a neighborhood, the idea that you're going to have some National Guard members who, gratefully sign up for this kind of duty, drive around in tanks in Anacostia for a couple weeks. How exactly is that? I don't get it.
maybe it
I don't
scares people to stay home. I don't know.
stay home. We'll wait you out. You
There's
know,
no evidence from what I've seen, maybe Dennis, you have seen, that having the National Guard in DC has led to a reduction in crime anyway.
no, no. In fact, one of the issues they are having is that they are making arrests, whether it's not the National Guard, it's just the Metropolitan Police Department and the U.S. Attorney there, the former Fox News analyst, is not having a success rate in convictions. So I'm not. I mean, I don't really not sure what the game plan is, and I'm not sure they think they know what the game plan is, because it's just more of a spectacle and a theater.
So one of the things I don't understand, look, you and I were both in state government at, very high levels. And I always thought basically that the National Guard belongs to the governor, belongs to the state. And it's a little confusing for me to see the president do this because if you look at the insurrection on January 6th, um, the governors were waiting to be told what to do or waiting to be asked what to do. I know the governor of Virginia, the governor of Maryland did not send the National Guard in, even though they wanted to, because they wanted to see if the federal government wanted them in. How does it work with the National Guard? I usually think of the National Guard as state function, not federal.
They have a dual hat, much more of a state function than a federal function. But
Because you, as chief of staff, would have overseen seen them,
yeah, we had an adjutant general of the
right?
Arizona National Guard who reported to the governor, and when he retired, the governor on her own picked his replacement. No one from the Pentagon, nobody, not the president. He was a member of her cabinet. He reported to his boss, the adjutant general of the National Guard of Arizona, was the governor of Arizona. What is going on here is, what I meant by the reference to a dual hat is that the president does have authority, and I apologize because it's just off the top of my head from 20 years of memory. I think it's Title 10. The president does have the authority to call out the National Guard to assist the Department of Defense in particular matters. Now, that even said, and I think more as a norm than anything else, is presidents in the past didn't do that without talking to the governor first, because the adjutant general is an officer of the state. And so the idea of the federal government saying we're going to call out the National Guard, well, it's rare incidents where that occurs, A, and B, they do it in conjunction in a dialogue with the governor of that particular state. None of that occurred here. And so so they've ended up confusing the matter of making it appear that the National Guard is just another arm of the president at the Pentagon, and it's not accurate.
Well, does that usurp the governor's authority?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely does.
So it's
Yeah.
something, it's a power that the governor has, but the president in this case is overstepping. So could the Arizona, let's just play this out. Let's make believe this was Phoenix and the president called in the National Guard. Could the governor say no? Two, could the guard refuse?
Up to a certain point. I mean, I apologize. I don't know off the top of my head because it's been a while. I don't know
Sure.
the prerequisites, but there are prerequisites that the president can declare under, I believe, Title 10 to be able to say, I need to federalize the National Guard for the following incident or incidents, which is a rare step that's taken, but can be taken. So it's basically a federalization of a state entity, and the state entity in the particular circumstance here is the National Guard of the state.
So you also mentioned a little bit about investigating crimes. And so I guess my question on that one is if if the National Guard were to make an arrest as the United States attorney for the district, how does that even work with you? I mean, as far as gathering information, finding out what they did, what the perpetrator did, what the defendant did. How does that work for you as the United States attorney? I mean, how do you prosecute a case that in some way or form was sent by the National Guard, or are they even sending cases?
They're not sending cases. They're just a presence. Well, I'll go back a step. So Governor Napolitano of Arizona, as did Governor Richardson in New Mexico, both of them called out their National Guards of their respective states to assist on the border. And so National Guard members did their duty on the border in pursuant to the direction by a state governor, but they weren't arresting people coming across the border. They were supplementing the efforts of Border Patrol by filling other positions. In other words, the National Guard sent down mechanics. Like, you can put more Border Patrol agents on the border because we're going to take care of all your mechanical work. We'll do engineering work. We'll do fencing and so forth like that.
I see.
They weren't doing arresting. They weren't doing investigations. They were taking steps that allowed the Border Patrol to put more officers on the border by backfilling other activities that Border Patrol agents would be doing if the National Guard wasn't there.
So logistical and those type of things, largely.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it helps. There's no question it helps, and it could help a police department. But this rollout in Los Angeles and now in Memphis and the threat in Chicago and Portland, the impression is that they're going to show up and reduce crime. Well, the only way they could reduce crime is if the local police department said, "Hey, thanks for showing up, guys. Because you showed up, we can take a bunch of our officers who are in the doing paperwork or some other activity and get them out on the streets."
Well, you dealt with this a lot. I mean, you were very involved in putting more cops on the street with President Clinton. We talked about it in our first session. Um, is that what the police want? I mean, do the local police want the National Guard in there?
Well, I would assume on the record I'm going to say yes, but I assume in reality it's confusing to them. It doesn't. I mean, it's all ephemeral, right? It's going to be short and brief, and they know that. And so whatever whatever their tasks are or duties are going to be have to be short term. Um, and it doesn't. I mean, I think any police department, any police chief at any level of any size would say, that's the last thing I need is the National Guard. Here's what I need. I need license plate readers.
Mm.
I need more resources for my for to do DNA. That's what I need. I don't need guys in tanks driving up and down the street. That doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah. Um, when I think of the National Guard, I do think of natural disasters, and we talked about this a little bit with the possibility of the closure of the government. But I think of you always see the picture of the guys and the women in uniform filling up sandbags, for example, or
Right.
assisting in. So what happens again if we've deployed the National Guard to Portland, and God forbid there's a problem in the Gulf, of Mexico and the Gulf Coast? And people are needed there. What happens at that situation?
I would assume that you have a situation where, I mean, every state has a National Guard, and so certain states, obviously, the overwhelming majority of states are not sending anyone to Portland, Oregon. So we have a bad hurricane hit in North Carolina. And the governor of North Carolina says, we need more help. They have an internal system that all the National Guards interact with each other,
But
and they
some
put out.
states are sending thousands, I hear.
Yeah, yeah, but they'll. You could have 4 or 5 states in the South say, we're going to have 1,500 National Guard members from other states in North Carolina by tomorrow night. And
Right, and
there's,
they fill
when
in.
when a hurricane hits, the Southeast like that, there's a unlimited amount of tasks that need to be done. Sandbags, rescuing people, right? Getting people out of the flood waters, running facilities, shelter facilities. There's a million tasks, unlimited, that could be done. But that's that. I mean, and National Guard's used to that. That's historically what the National Guard has done, and so they know how to do that. And they're not, they do it every, hurricane season, and they learn from what they do, and they do it better every year. That's hugely different than, hey, go show up in Portland and drive your tank up and down the street and scare some, drug dealers.
The president used a term the other day and talking about Portland that I haven't heard in a very long time. And maybe you kind of answered it by saying he was looking at a 5-year-old video. But Antifa. It's interesting. He talked about Antifa as if it were the American Communist Party or something, and they were marching in Portland and they were trying to take over the government or something. He basically said that Antifa is a threat to America and we have to stop it. And that's why he's sending in the National Guard. Uh, you were prosecutor. Do you deal with Antifa? What are they? Who are they? Are they a threat to America? And what is their overarching purpose?
I think Antifa is like Linus's Great Pumpkin, but an evil one. I mean, I did that, like, it's
As I recall, the Great Pumpkin never showed up, right?
exactly.
I love reading Peanuts.
I mean, been involved around the Justice Department and been involved with. I was a state prosecutor too. I was a chief deputy in the Arizona Attorney General's office. So I've been around law enforcement investigations, the criminal justice system for 35 years. I never, ever have I remember any case involving so-called Antifa. I mean, it's just a boogeyman.
Is it an organization at all? What is it?
I don't even know if they're filed anywhere. Like, I don't
Yeah.
even. I think at most it might be people identify themselves as Antifa, but I mean, look, President Trump did the same thing his first term. He came out with some declaration of, Antifa is a terrorist group. We're going to treat him like terrorists. We're going to go after him. He's playing that. It's a golden oldie for him. He's just got the same record.
So it kind of begs the question of why. You were chief of staff to a major politician, right? Governor of a major state. what's the political purpose here? What's going on? Why is suddenly Antifa?
You need a, although this is not concrete, but the impression he's trying to give is you need a concrete demon, an evil that that Superman and Batman are going to go take on. I mean, you got to it's otherwise crime in general, particularly at the local level, is just kind of amorphous. There's a lot of crime going on. We all know it. But oh God, there's got to be a demon behind it. There's got to be some group behind this, and it's got to be some radical group, and I'm going to take on that group. And when I defeat that group, we'll all be safe. I mean, it's kind of a fable.
Do you think it's a pure play to the base?
Yes.
Just to make them happy. It's
Yeah.
interesting. I spoke to Alvin Bragg, the district attorney in New York, some time ago, and he makes the point very convincingly with statistics that crime in New York is going down. It's going down significantly, as it is in almost every major American city. The problem is what you see on TV every night, and this is not remotely a criticism of the media, but what you see on TV every night are these horrible crimes that happen. A friend of mine was cold cocked walking down the street by some guy, who probably was nuts, right? They try to make it sound like it's the immigrants or whatever it is, but it just crime is clearly going down. So there's got to be another purpose for this.
Yeah, if you watch local, I mean, look, I'm here in Phoenix, Arizona. I watch local news. It comes out at 10 o'clock at night. The first three or four stories are, a shooting that occurred in an apartment complex that invariably was between two guys who knew each other, a couple car crashes, and then another shooting. I mean, and that's the lead on the news. I mean, it's so. But let me go back real quickly because when we talk about national crime rates, and I think you'll find this very interesting if it already isn't so obvious, which is New York City alone drives national crime rates. There's over 40,000, sworn officers in the city of New York. I mean, the FBI is like 14,000. So, I mean, the FBI's national, federal, they're going to come in and solve all these problems. They're a third of this, quarter of the size of the New York City Police Department.
Right.
And so when I was in the White House working for President Clinton on the Domestic Policy Council, part of my job was to track what was going on in crime and crime rates and so forth. And it was evident to any criminologist that national crime rates, if New York City crime rate goes down, the entire national crime rate goes down.
Goes down because the magnitude.
Exactly, because
The multiplier.
the numbers are such a high percentage of the overall. The New York numbers are such a high percentage of the overall crime rate nationally that if it goes down in New York, then it literally will
Whole
affect the
country.
national numbers.
Right. But it's going down everywhere. I mean, look at every
It
major
is,
city,
yeah, yeah,
Houston, whatever.
yeah,
But let
yeah.
me switch from crime per se to an issue that you were a big leader on and got a lot of kudos back in the day, assault weapons. And the whole assault weapon ban of 1994. I know you as a White House staffer, you worked really close with Rahm Emanuel on that and whatnot. The law is expired, right? It was set up intentionally for 10 years, have never been able to renew it. What are your views on that? Should the law be renewed? Was it successful? Is it the type of thing we need? Or are we just in a period of time where anything dealing with the Second Amendment is just, I'll use a New York term, which I hope everyone understands. It's just the third rail. And if you touch it, it's the end of your career. So what is the story on assault weapons? Do we need to renew this?
Yeah, but by standing by itself, it's inadequate. In other words, yeah, I think statistically proves that it's been proven out that when the 94 Assault Weapon Act was in effect, that it had an impact. But it's standing alone. It's not going to have it would not ever have a full impact on a number of firearms offenses in the country.
So what do you mean by standing alone? What else would you do?
Oh, I think we hamper law enforcement with regards to their ability to monitor licensing. I think our background checks could be more robust. I think there's a whole area of
Red flag
uh,
laws and stuff.
exactly. I mean, there's a long litany of um, provisions that actually some states have adopted that have been effective, but only can be so effective, as we all know. Whatever New York does doesn't help if the guns are being shipped up from Virginia.
Right.
So it would have to be more national than anything else. I mean, the other problem with anything at the federal level, I mean, you look at the 1994 Assault Weapons Act because it was so monumental. It was like the first time the NRA lost politically. But the part of the problem also is that even back then, the Republicans were trying to block everything, and so if they couldn't block it, they'd try to water it down. Like the first Brady Act was a much better than the law that actually passed because the Republicans kept trying to water it down, and then to water it down enough to be able to say, well, yeah, now it doesn't work. Like, in other words, oh yeah, we don't have the votes to stop this, but we're going to water it down. And then when it is implemented, then we can criticize it and say, see, it doesn't even work. Well, it doesn't work because you watered it down.
Do you think there's any appetite? It doesn't seem to be on the Hill anymore for these type of legislation. I mean, when you look at what's been going on, the horrific mass murders, the shootings, it's almost every day now. And you kind of, I don't know if you ever create a callus big enough that you don't pay attention to it. But do you think there's any appetite for any type of gun control? I mean, we just had this horrible, horrible assassination of Charlie Kirk. But you don't hear anyone saying, well, let's get guns out of the hands of people.
We had one yesterday at LDS Church in Michigan.
Right.
Horrific, horrific. I mean, I think you're alluding to it, which is we've become desensitized to it. I mean, the news cycle is so quickly, and we're so anticipating it. The fact that so many of these horrendous crimes are occurring, that so many that we just wait for the next one. I think there's been I think there's unfortunately been a fairly palatable societal resignation to this.
I've been watching a lot of news, and we actually did a show with Anthony Scaramucci, which we talked about this quite a bit, about the alienation of young men in America. And if you look at a lot of these mass killings, they're young men in their 20s, and it's hard to see. I mean, a lot of people are very quick to say there's a political angle to all of this, and it seems that Democrats get murdered and Republicans get murdered. I'm not so sure I see a political side to that.
No, I would agree with that. And let me just reference an experience in my past. I was a U.S. attorney when Congresswoman Gabby Giffords was shot at.
That's right in your backyard.
It was, and a judge who I knew really well, Judge Roll, was murdered there. He went there to go meet his member
Right.
of Congress at a Safeway. Loeffner, the individual who committed the atrocity, um, he should have been on some serious meds. And his parents admitted, in their interview right after the horrendous incident, that the son had been complaining that he heard voices in his head. So he had also, here's the other part that's really disturbing about it. He had been a student at Pima Community College in Tucson. He was a student and he was banned from the campus because of his behavior. So the officials at the school, at the college, and the law enforcement at the campus said, this guy's scary, and we're not going to allow him on our campus anymore. Well, there was no system. If there was one, they didn't use it. Well, how come the sheriff's office and the Tucson Police Department weren't notified of that? How come we've banned someone from a campus because of his bizarre behavior, and he ends up shooting a member of Congress and killing a federal judge and murdering several other people? I mean, in other words, if you had a really robust system, you would have had one that you would have expected one at least that where that information would have been shared, and it was like let's keep an eye on
Okay.
this guy. Let's go talk to his parents. No, that never happened.
I find a lot of people though fall back on this mental health piece. And I guess it's circular in a way. I mean, there is a serious, very serious mental health issue in this country. But for me, it's not a fallback to say, well, it's a mental health issue, not a gun issue. Well, guess what? If there weren't guns, then people who have mental health issues wouldn't have them.
I don't even know how to respond because I fully agree.
Yeah, I mean, it's just sort of, it makes no sense to me. Like, okay, if we get rid of the guns, we should take care of the mental health, but just saying it's a mental health issue isn't enough. So let's move
No,
to,
it's a political pivot because the same individuals are saying it's not the guns, it's the mental health. They're not doing anything to address the mental health. It's just a pivot. It's a political pivot because there's the Loeffner case with regards to Congresswoman Giffords is a prime example. Why don't we have a system where someone who's banned from a campus that we don't even go check with his parents?
right.
What's going on with this guy? Is there anything we need to do? No follow up at all.
So we're going to pivot also. Let's pivot to immigration. Since you were in a unique position on the immigration issue, because you got to see it as a chief of staff, as a U.S. attorney from Homeland Security. I mean, you saw it from a lot of angles. You also, interestingly enough, I know you worked in an advisory role for the Attorney General with the subcommittee on the border and immigration laws. What did that teach you? What lessons should we take from there? You know, we have struggled for decades now in coming up with a solution to immigration, to a solution to the border. You were the chief of staff to a border governor. You were senior advisor to the Secretary of Homeland Security. You were U.S. Attorney. You have seen the border in so many different ways. What do we need to be doing?
I mean, I think there have been attempts by every administration to do this, but I really do think that there's issues at the countries of origin um, that that we should be addressing. I mean, the idea that particularly in the last 10 years, an overwhelming percentage of the individuals showing up at the border were from um, Central American countries that were failed states. Guatemala, Nicaragua, El Salvador, Honduras. These people are risking their lives to journey up here, and so we can make a secure border. We can take all kinds of steps and spend billions of dollars on it. But I think at the end of the day, you got to address what's going on in these countries of origin, and so I think it's a bigger role with the State Department. I think it's a bigger role with our embassies there. I think it's a bigger activity at that level as opposed to, let's build a medieval wall and prevent people from coming in. Now, let me add real quickly, because this is critically important, that of the number of undocumented individuals in the United States, almost half of them came in legally and overstayed. I mean, it's not just the influx of people running across the Arizona Sonora Desert. It's for every one of those, there's another one who came in legally and overstayed a visa and just stuck around.
Yeah, I've never really understood this. We have so much technology. How complicated is it to know where somebody is? You come in, you know where they are, they have to tell you. You might not remember this, Dennis, but when I was a kid, there used to be television ads, and I forgot what month it was, but there was these television ads. Now, you couldn't use this language today, but it was warning. If you're an illegal alien, probably don't use that phrase anymore, but if you're an illegal alien, remember, you must register by such and such a date. And I believe people went and registered. So I guess my question on that one is, we have the technology. We know where Dennis Burke is tonight. We know where Richard Gordon is. This is not that complicated. Why why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we tracking people? And it's going to lead me to a question about President Biden. It's going to lead me to a question of when he changed, and I want to get to this at some point, when he changed, Section 42 to, the health provision, which said you're allowed to stop people from coming in, they let people in and said 3 years from now we'll come find you. Well, anyone would consider that ridiculous, right? On its face of it. Why can't we track people? Why don't people have to register at least once a year and tell us where they are? They're guests in our country. Why not?
Well, they are. Most of them are registering. I mean, before even the Biden administration, that there was a long history of individuals showing up at ICE offices to report in. They're required to report in. The problem was that it wasn't that we didn't know where they were. The much larger problem was the docket for them to hear their immigration matter in an immigration court was so inundated that you know, they come across the border in 2024. They report to, the federal CBP or ICE or whoever stopped them. They're given paperwork. They're told to appear in court, and then the court says your hearing is in 2028. So that we inundated the court system, well, particularly for a fairly wide definition of asylum that is law, that allowed individuals to declare asylum but not be rejected at the port of entry. They would get a hearing date, and the courts were so inundated that the hearing date would be 4 or 5 years in the future, and they would stay in the U.S. till then.
So why can't you deputize? I mean, we have so many lawyers in this country. Why can't you deputize people, make people judges, administrative law judges, whatever, have young lawyers, for example, do these cases? Why can't we do something like that? Hire tens of thousands of lawyers, judges, retired judges, and do these cases in a timely fashion? Because that's ridiculous. Not what you're saying, not that you're saying it, but the
No, I'm
process
not.
is,
I'm
is
not. I'm not.
ridiculous.
I'm not defending it, and I think you
Yeah.
could do that, and I think we could have done that, and there was no reason not to, other than the fact that it was never a priority. I honestly, between this has been going on for years and years. It wasn't just Biden. I mean, it's the
Oh,
first Trump.
well, George W.
Obama.
Bush had a plan that actually looked like it might have worked, and I think the Republican Senate killed it.
I still think, sitting here today with not with the statistics in front of me, but there's still a possibility that the Obama administration deported more individuals than the Trump administration
That's
did.
true. I've seen that. I've seen that. So, they always talk that a lot of these people are in gangs, and there's a drug background and whatnot. You prosecuted a lot of people. I'm sure you prosecuted a lot of immigrants who came across the border. Is that factually true?
By a small percentage. I mean, the overwhelming majority of individuals who risk their lives to come up from Guatemala and so forth, aren't coming up to become a member of a gang. They're coming up to find a job and a livelihood, and not die of hunger or poverty in Guatemala.
So, is it-
That's the higher percentage.
so isn't this just going to get worse as those governments fail, or even as climate change affects, countries on the border like Colombia or Brazil? They're going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. I think people are going to want to migrate not only for political reasons, but also for environmental reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. But let me just add to that what's really evident that's going on now is the Trump administration wants to have an impact on legal immigration too. In other words, my lord, the other day now he's saying that HB1 visas, he's putting
Right.
$100,000 or price tags on them.
Right.
So they're basically saying, I mean, the argument in the past, which you alluded to, which we should have focused on more, which is we have a broken system. Everyone admits it's broken. Congress actually did try to fix it and make it more functional. That would reduce illegal immigration because more people would have a pathway to be here legally, and they didn't pass it. They
Right.
couldn't come to a compromise. So the Congress intentionally kept the system broken, and it will continue to be broken until you change the underlying laws of it.
You talked about the wall a few minutes ago. Would the wall make any difference? Would it help?
No.
Why?
In particular areas it might, but I mean, the most people envision the United States Mexico border as what they saw on the Roadrunner Willie Coyote cartoons. This flat, expansive area that you could see anybody, and you just put up a wall, and it's just not the reality. I mean, most of particularly in Arizona, the terrain between Arizona and Mexico is mountainous. So, so there's all kinds of areas where people have no intention ever to cross. They're going to cross in particular areas, and they're still trying to cross by hiding in vehicles coming across the border. So I think it's a misuse of resources, and as Governor Napolitano, famously used to say, you show me a 20-foot wall, I'll show you a 21-foot ladder.
Right.
I mean,
Right.
there's no limitation to the creativity of a desperate person trying to get in this country, and the idea that some medieval wall is going to be panacea to everything.
You work closely with ICE in many times in your career. Uh, what's their real role? What are they supposed to be doing?
Well, this goes back to the fact of how Department of Homeland Security came to be. I mean, there used to be INS, which was pure immigration, and then there was Customs, which obviously not only had an enforcement role at the border, but was involved in trade. And we built the Department of Homeland Security after 9/11 and renamed these agencies, but they had legacy powers left over, and so as opposed to Border Patrol, who's literally supposed to be on the border doing border control there. ICE has the leftover customs authority to do all kinds of trade investigations and do immigration investigations. So they're more involved in the they're supposed to be. I don't know what they are right now. They're supposed to
Well, it
be
seems like
doing.
they're involved in the deportation, finding these people who are here, overstayed their visas. I mean, I just read today the superintendent of schools of Des Moines, Iowa, they say was here illegally, and they arrested him and are deporting him.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that too. Yeah, I mean, they always had interior authority to do that. That wasn't the emphasis of the work because what ICE was actually really good at, or when they really wanted to function, was doing long-term investigations to figure out, what were the organizations that were bringing people across, and how do we go after them. They were doing a lot of money laundering cases. There's in order to have a immigration organization to bring individuals across, you gotta be able to transfer funds between the countries. ICE used to, and I know they still can, but that was one of their expertise. So that it
So are
wasn't
we,
just the.
I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just saying, are we diverting them? Are we diverting them from their job? Are we diverting them from what they need to be doing? And one could argue, perhaps, that the cases you're talking about, money laundering and those type of things, might be more important than, and I don't know the gentleman, but the superintendent of schools of Iowa, Des Moines.
Yeah, I could agree. I could not agree more. I mean, it came out this morning that the drug cases are down. Drug cases are down because they threw everybody at immigration cases. So for an administration that claiming that they care about the drug trade and fentanyl, et cetera, they took all the resources that or most of the resources dedicated to those cases, and they switched them over to immigration. I mean, you can't keep announcing we're going to do this, we're going to do this, and we're going to do this if you don't have the actual personnel to be doing it, and you keep diverting them to do other cases.
Well, you might have noticed that ICE now has the largest enforcement budget in the country. It's significantly more than the FBI. The FBI budget is, I believe, $10.1 billion, and ICE's budget is over $30 billion. So, the president has really put a lot of money into ICE, and the DOJ budget itself his new budget, it has decreased. So, there is a tremendous emphasis on what ICE is doing.
Yeah, and look, we've gone through this before. We went through this in the 90s and probably in the 2000s at one point, where a lot of money was thrown at these immigration agencies, and then there's because they have the money, they're expected to hire up real quickly. Well, who are you hiring now, and what are your standards? I mean, there's no question. In fact, they've already had to admit it that they had to lower their standards because there's such an emphasis of like get these guys out on the street now. You've got the money, hire them. Well, who are you hiring? Well, all right, go steal them from local law enforcement agencies. Those guys are qualified. Okay, we'll steal them. Well, and you just took uh, seasoned officers off the street who are fighting crime in our cities, and you took them off the street and put them in ICE now because you gave them a $50,000 bonus.
Right.
It's robbing
Right.
Peter to pay Paul.
And then you just have issues on the other side. So let me deal with two subjects that have nothing to do with any of this, but they're things that are in your past that I find really interesting. A lot of people don't realize that you worked on redistricting in your past.
I
And
did.
obviously, there's a lot of talk about redistricting. We've seen what Texas has done, adding seats. We've seen what Missouri has done to try to redistrict for the House. California has retaliated and doing it, and some other states might as well. Talk to me about redistricting. Has it work? How should it work?
Well, it's inherently political.
Of
But
course.
I'll give you an
But does
example
it
of
have to, Dennis, does it have to be political?
no. In fact, a number of states, including Arizona, were so fed up with how the districts were being drawn, and now in the Arizona Constitution, because of an initiative, we have an independent redistricting commission. So we created it. So we took it away from the legislature, and five individuals every cycle when we're ready to redraw districts with the census, um, are take community. They're required to take community input, and they're required to bring some balance to our districts. Now, it's not foolproof because who are these five people? Well, two of them are from the Democrats and two are from the Republicans, and the fifth, who's the chair, who's supposed to be independent, is one way or another, someone figures out a way to get their person to be the chair. So you can't completely cleanse the process of some kind of political input. And they listen to members of Congress like who have current districts who know their districts better than anyone. Let me explain to you the composition of my current district and why I want
Sure.
to keep it this way or that way. So it's still, elements of politicization of it. But that said, it's you could not do what's going on in Texas or California. You could not do that in Arizona because you'd have to do it through the redistricting commission and it would be too challenging.
Well, California has a redistricting commission, but I think what they're
But they're
doing
going
is
to the ballot. They're
they're
going
going
to
to
the
the
ballot.
ballot.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
they're going to the ballot to overrule the commission.
So do you oppose what's being done? Mid census, decade redistricting?
Yes, I mean it makes no sense. I mean it,
Well, it
and
makes perfect sense, actually. You may
uh,
disagree with it, but it does have a strong purpose.
yeah, but why now?
Because now would give, I mean, you know the answer. It's to give the advantage. I think the Republicans are concerned they're going to lose the 26th election, and the only way to win the 26th election is to change the districts.
Yeah, you're talking about political sense. I'm
Oh,
talking
right.
about
That right. There's no other sense. I mean, there's no other sense for anything else, you know? There's nothing
yeah.
inherent about congressional districts. I have changed personally 180 on this topic, and this happened to me a few years ago.
Uh,
I know you'll find this really odd, Dennis, but when I was in government, I thought it made a lot of sense for the governor to be personally involved with drawing the districts. But now that I'm not in government, I think that a nonpartisan um, group of people, commission, probably led by a retired Supreme Court justice, should draw the districts. I've changed completely on this. So
Yeah, yeah. It somewhat depends for all of us on what hat we're wearing.
at that exact moment. Hey, I'm going
But
to,
I mean, look, if what bothers me the most about this and why I said I find it indefensible is particularly the timing of it. Like literally, like we're guess what? It's halftime of the football game, and when you come out in the second half, we shrunk the field.
yeah,
For I mean, it's the game's not the last game's not even over. It's not off season. It's they literally they're Texas, because of the White House, is in complete panic that they're going to lose the House. And so they started this, and it's like what they teach in national security law. It's mutual assured destruction. So Texas does this, and what's California and New York going to do, or any other state? Well, if you're
right.
going to do that, we're going to do it, and then it just becomes a free for all.
But you look at this and you look at the Voting Rights Act and you look at the Civil Rights Act, and like cities like Indianapolis that have a majority minority, they're carving up into five little districts in order to make sure that they cannot elect a Democrat, which means they will not elect the current incumbent, Andre Carson, is black. They're going to make sure that these people are now represented by a white person. That's not the reason they're doing it. It just so happens that the current incumbent happens to be black. But the truth of the matter is that the same thing is going to happen in Texas and
Yeah,
whatnot. And minority representation in states like yours, for example, would go down.
it's true. Yeah, absolutely accurate. Yeah, all the more reason why you should have a independent redistricting commission and not overrule it by another initiative.
So let me turn to our last topic, and we'll quickly, but it just so incredibly fascinates me. Um, You were intimately involved in working on three Supreme Court nominations. That is incredible. I know you worked on the nomination of Justice Souter, Clarence Thomas, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Could you talk about that a little bit? Because I just find that amazing and just fascinating. What did you do? What was it like? What was your responsibility?
So I was a counsel on the United States Senate Judiciary Committee at the time, and the chairman of the committee was Joe Biden, and Ted Kennedy was on the committee, Strom Thurmond was on the committee, Orrin Hatch was on the committee, Howard Metzenbaum, I mean Paul Simon, I mean just these historical figures. So as it's become today, very contentious as to at any point where there's some sense that a justice is going to retire, and so the preparation starts long before the hearings because there's anticipation, right? That whoever the president is, however they admit it or not, they've got a short list, and so you're conducting research and background on these potential nominees long before at the time, Byron White or someone else, was Thurgood Marshall was going to retire. I mean, so the prep was going on long before the justice said that they were going to step down. And Richard, the thing I always remember about it too was that we had really good staff. I mean, really good, and we had the full committee staff who worked directly for Chairman Biden. There were people, that's all they did. That's literally all they did is work on despite the huge, jurisdiction of the Judiciary Committee, there were really sharp lawyers who all they worked on was background research on potential nominees, particularly the Supreme Court, but obviously also Court of Appeals and District Court judges, because they all came through the Judiciary Committee to be confirmed through advice and consent. But on top of that, because was a lot of really good reporters and a lot of interest groups on the right and left who are doing their own work and research. So part of my recollection was, we would learn things by reading about it in the paper because some reporter, Nina Totenberg or some other reporter went and did an interview and got something about some nominee that we hadn't even found in any of the paperwork. and a lot of interest groups who had a lot of good lawyers working for them. So you're just inundated with information about these individuals, and then parsing through it, and then getting a sense that where your boss, in my case, Senator Deacon, when the hearings occurred, like what topics did he want to cover? What did he was what did he want to ask? Equal protection questions? What was he First Amendment questions? So you're drafting questions for the senator's consideration, and you're providing him background information, for him to be prepared for the hearing, so he can make a decision on how to vote.
When you look at the Souter confirmation compared to the Souter and the Ginsburg confirmations compared to the Thomas confirmation, totally different, right? I mean, the atmosphere was totally different.
Yeah, it was driven by the timing and the individual. I mean, the idea that who Thomas was replacing, how Thomas was framed by, explained or defined by the Bush administration, and
So
as
let me be clear, you
opposed,
don't mean he was framed on the issues,
I apologize. I mean, the framing of
the
how the
messaging.
yes, I apologize. Yeah, and Souter
I
was
thought
actually,
that's what you meant, Dennis.
no, it's
I
good to
just didn't want to
clarify.
leave it out there.
Yeah,
Dennis
we're
Burke
talking.
says Clarence Thomas was framed
Yeah,
by.
right. No, I'm glad you cleared that up. Yeah, Souter was actually difficult because the dearth of writings. I mean, he just like he he had written no law review articles. He had no speeches. He had been on the Federal Court of Appeals for, I think, like less than a year. He was a Supreme Court. He was in the Attorney General's office in New Hampshire, which is a really small state. He was on the Supreme Court of New Hampshire. No history, and
Probably
so
why they picked him.
exactly. Thomas was a prolific writer. He wrote a lot of law review articles and gave a lot of speeches. And my personal opinion was they were all they were all empty. I mean, this guy was not a scholar. He just wasn't. He wanted to present himself as a scholar. So he's constantly writing, these law review articles. And of course, we read them all. You had to read them all. And you're like, this is he's adding nothing to this area of law by his scholarship. I mean, like zero. Like it didn't. He had all kinds of other issues and controversies, as we all know. But if you're asking my personal opinion, the guy wasn't qualified because he was kind of a poser.
Intellectually didn't measure up in your mind.
Not even close, but he was trying to. Like, I'm
Yeah.
going to keep writing these articles. Like, there's nothing to them. What are you doing?
Eventually, someone will believe it. Hey,
Right.
last question. You've been extraordinarily generous with your time on both segments of this, so thank you. People forget Ruth Bader Ginsburg was confirmed 97-3.
Yeah, that's how it used
97
to
to
be. Yeah.
Yeah. Can that ever, ever, ever happen again? Do you ever see any scenario where the country could be united on someone like that? The Supreme Court used to be above reproach, but now it seems. Talk about that for a minute. Two questions then. I lied. Two questions. One will be, can we ever see a confirmation of someone who actually was pretty controversial in the sense of, Ruth Bader Ginsburg was the opposite of what you just described. This is someone who wrote a lot and had a lot of intellectual stuff out there. So one, is it possible, to have someone go through the process like that? So those are the two questions.
In the short term, I think the answer is definitively no. I mean, we're in a toxic political environment. We will be for a while. And I think if Thomas or Alito are planning on retiring before the end of Trump's term, I mean, I was, President Trump will light it on fire anyways, right? I mean, he's going to pick someone just intentionally to light it on fire. I would guess. We will find out, right? But yeah, I mean, we're in a much different world than we were back then. And Ginsburg was unbelievably qualified because she did so well at her hearings too, at how she answered questions, and her scholarly writings were legit. I mean, she was not only an incredibly impressive and accomplished legal advocate for an area of gender law that just basically helped create protections, but she followed it up with scholarly work and a really impressive judicial career before she got appointed, nominated to the bench.
But what about my other question? The role of the Supreme Court in American life, the way people look at the court. It just seems, I always grew up, obviously lawyer also, but I always grew up with tremendous respect for the court. And they may make mistakes, and they do from time to time, but you could always respect their decisions. And, you could disagree, but you could respect it. It doesn't seem like people feel that way anymore.
They definitely don't feel that way anymore. It's abundantly evident by just the polling on the court. And Roberts is going to leave the court one that is untrusted, much less than when he came to the bench. But with regards to what you just said as a lawyer, and how you viewed the court before and how you view it now, I mean, Congressman Jamie Raskin was out here a few years ago for an event for Congressman Stanton, and we were in a backyard, and so I raised my hand. I said, Congressman Raskin, who's a constitutional law teacher, right. And I said, Congressman, you view the court the same way you did as you did in law school. And he laughed and he said, actually, I think the court's always had issues. And then, of course, like any constitutional scholar, he went through this history of the court.
Sure.
And his Plessy versus Ferguson and the Taney court. And he went through and he said, so yeah, it's pretty much a reactionary body. And I said, all right, I got it. But what I'm hoping for is that he comes out for a fundraiser sometime in the next year or so. I'm going to ask him the same question and see how he answers it now as opposed to 4 years ago.
That'd be very interesting. I mean, he's an interesting guy. I should tell you that Congressman Stanton was also a guest on Unconventional Times. So,
good.
Yes, which was a couple months ago, which was very interesting. Listen, Dennis, you've been great. You've been a great guest. You've been very generous with your time. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So thank you very much.
Richard.
And
Thank you.
as I tell everyone on the show, Dennis, stay unconventional.
I will.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. So anyway, thank you all for listening. I appreciate it. And, we spoke quite a bit to our guest, Dennis Burke, about a number of issues. But I'll tell you what sticks out in my mind is that our government has changed in so many ways. We're switching our emphasis towards retribution and using government employees in ways that I don't think anyone ever anticipated or expected. We have changed the purpose of ICE and other agencies, and we have strayed away from a time where people of both parties could work together and find compromise. It just reminds me of the words of one of my former bosses, Governor Mario Cuomo, who said that we believe in only the government we need, but we insist on the government we need. And those are words we should think about. Our government needs to be providing us with all the services that we need, that our people require, but we only need certain services, and they shouldn't be doing things that are not in their purview. And we need to be thinking about that when our neighbors, which is what the National Guard is, they are our neighbors, they are our friends, they are the people we work with. We should be thinking about that when they're deployed and asked to do things in our streets. So anyway, that's it for tonight for our podcast. Please join us again on Unconventional Times. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And remember, you can also watch us on YouTube at UT-Richard Gordon. That's YouTube at the letters UT-Richard Gordon. Thanks again. We'll catch you next time. And remember, stay unconventional.
You've been listening to Unconventional Times with your host, Richard Gordon. Check out all of the episodes of Unconventional Times on Apple, Google, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. To learn more about Richard Gordon and all of his unconventional conversations, head on over to unconventionaltimes.com. Thanks for listening.